Good afternoon. I'm intimately aware that I'm the last thing between you and lunch. My name is Damon Becknel. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer, or at least one of, at Microsoft. I'm honored to be here in front of such a distinguished international audience. And without further ado, so a bit first on the investments that Microsoft makes within security. Workforce of roughly 34,000 full-time security. We've recently invested heavily into what we call our tip of the spear. Tip of the spear is how we find, how we track, and how we emulate threats. And so that's collectively the red team, the hunt team, and our threat intel team. They've seen rapid growth in the recent year to great effect. Of course, the company's been around for 50 years, so we can say we've got 50 years experience in the field, and the amount of ongoing threats against Microsoft and our customers is a staggering number, requiring staggering amounts of data to identify and track. Ultimately, there's about 1,500 active groups being tracked, and roughly 600 of those are nation states. Several things to be concerned about when we talk about nation states. First, many organizations, and not just companies, but governments as well, US and abroad, still contain a significant amount of technical debt. And we talk about technical debt, we're talking about older systems, older protocols, older ways of securing. I won't ask for a show of hands, but for anyone who's still using single-factor username and password, please stop today for every account. I don't care who you are, what level, within the organization, and that includes for personal use. If you're not protecting your own email with some type of preferably phishing-resistant MFA, do that. Leave right now and do that. Let's just say that. It's a significant problem. Cybercrime's up here. It's not technically nation state per se, but it is the largest scourge on the internet today. Ransomware, at least in my opinion, is largely defeatable before it begins, and it's typically some combination of technical debt or supply chain that's ultimately the Achilles heel, and we'll talk a bit more about the supply chain. I consider, to some extent, the North Korean IT vendor threat that everyone's read about in the press of late as part of that supply chain. There's been some notable direct supply chain attacks. So if you want to do so, I'd suggest Googling Salt Typhoon, a Chinese actor who infiltrated and infected much of the US telecom and ISPs, some abroad, but was heavily US targeted, really highlighting the need for encryption in motion, really putting an exclamation point on those who are still using SMS or telephone and as an MFA factor has long since deemed insecure, but now they just put an exclamation point on it and saying it's really insecure. And then of recent, there's in the last week maybe, notification disclosure that Commvault, a common backup software solution capability, has undergone significant woes in the recent past. And so there are numerous supply chain issues, so it's something you should be aware of. And if you think the problem with the North Korean threat is confined to North Korea, I submit to you, you should probably go back and think about that a little bit. No tactic is necessarily novel, it's just a matter of whether it's been discovered. A number of threats, and for here at Microsoft, we look, when we have named and attributed actors, we assign a type of storm to that actor, depending on the country of origin. So threats broadly, as they're classified and identified, are given a storm number, a storm-4-digit number, and then once attribution is reached, a specific type of storm is assigned, along with some usually clever, cliche first word. So Midnight Blizzard, of course, Blizzard being a Russian set of actors, Midnight Blizzard being a particularly gnarly actor, is notable of late, of course, being pretty active in Poland. Talked about earlier this morning with the Cozy Bear discussion. Did some novel work using remote desktop protocol. Please, by the way, if you're running remote desktop protocol, don't expose that to the internet. Please use VPN or something else, but I digress. And then, of course, I've already mentioned here once or twice, the Storm 0287 is certainly one of the North Korean actor sets that have been they're applying through normal job application processes, winning those jobs, and then working those jobs. And the goal there is to gain financial advantage, to funnel money back to North Korea for their weapons programs. And this is just one set actor. We pivot a bit to the broader picture. So the Ukraine, at least in the European theater, is the top targeted country. And globally, it's third behind the US and Israel, Taiwan being a necessary fourth. But as we drill in past just the European theater to the EU specifically, we see the chart change a little bit. Ukraine and UK drop off. But suffice to say, the threat actors still choose to target a broad breadth of targets. But from a nation state perspective, they're very motivated on what's going on across the globe. So Iran loves to hit the US and Israel for obvious reasons. The Russia, with its active campaign in Ukraine, is a favorite target there and still doesn't leave off the US, of course. And China, at least from a nation state perspective, still has a pretty broad set of targets. So what can we do about it collectively? So first, contemplate strengthening your agreements, particularly for information exchange, technical information exchange, threat exchange. In this cyber warfare, information is absolutely power. The more data, the more information you can have, the more understanding you can have of this environment. I commonly refer to cyber as it evades the five senses. Right? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't hear it. And so the only way you can really sense in the environment is through data collection. And the best way to collect data is to have a lot of partnerships and have a lot of technical telemetry to be able to start, quote unquote, seeing the environment. Attribution is still a bit of a black art. Different organizations have different requirements and standards for conducting attribution. We are typically at Microsoft pretty conservative. We want to be as certain as possible with our attribution, and so our requirements to attribute to a particular entity is quite high. Possibly exchanging tactics and coming up with some commonalities there could be powerful. And then while the slide depicts deterrence and deterrent actions, what I'd say is this is really about how do we respond and disrupt the adversaries, the bad guys. Collective action is one way. You heard about countermeasures being another. Countermeasures means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So being a bit more precise, from my former life, countermeasure might be doing things that would be illegal in the private sector. But when you're the military, you can do other things that the private sector isn't necessarily privy to. No presentation in modern day would be complete without some discussion of AI. And so, of course, let's go through that a little bit. AI itself opens the door for new system threats. So it's kind of a Web 3, now 4.0 type of threat. You can actually inject prompts into the prompts and do some interesting attacks to the back end of the systems, potentially pulling data back out. Of course, attackers are certainly trying to get after the infrastructure itself. It's a collection of compute and storage, and you might well imagine, particularly for the more containerized instances of AI where large organizations are pulling in their sensitive data, indexing that data, and using it to train their models a little more deeply. It's a treasure trove of information and processing power. On the other side, the adversary use of AI. Former life was with a verification company, and we saw numerous attempts and actions to use AI to empower impersonation, both from a real-time live video stream, so overlaying face geometry and face over a real actor so that you have effectively a video of someone else, so kind of a talking picture, if you will. It's getting better and better. It's getting three-dimensional. And certainly from a post-production, voice is absolutely feasible. The real-time voice has still been a problem. And then we also saw it in terms of counterfeit documents. So a very trained eye could pick out the counterfeit documents, but even AI detection of AI-produced counterfeit documents was still a real problem and quite sophisticated. It's also being used to empower scams, phishing. So certainly, if you're old enough, remember some of the old emails of the Nigerian prince. It's a little far-fetched, and so attackers are now using AI and the generative capabilities to not just craft emails, but then to conduct operations over social media to do further pig butchering, I think is the term they assign to it, where they're going after scams and empowering threat actors and attackers to do real-time scams using very colloquial, very easy-speaking language that doesn't sound like it's someone in, say, I don't know, Nigeria or Ghana. And then from a information operations perspective, used to amplify messaging or create messaging, understand messaging, and we'll drill into some of those messages here in a minute. So here's just one of two samples we'll talk about from an I/O perspective. It speaks for itself here. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I got a lot of slides, and I want to leave time for questions. But Russians again, trying, as we've seen, trying to justify their actions in the Ukraine. Not a lot of creativity here, but certainly the use of AI to empower it. So what we do at Microsoft, certainly we have a number of indicators of threat activity, threat selectors, and so when we see threat actors leveraging AI, we can detect and monitor and then be transparent with relevant parties about what transpired and allow those parties to take action. AI itself can be used for good. That's the purpose, is to use it for good. From a security context perspective, we can use it to find patterns in data and telemetry that evades human eye, human detection, and so effectively use AI to create detection algorithms itself so we can further find the bad guys. It underpins some of our security technologies, so Sentinel and Defender, along with the Security Copilot, now integrate AI behind the scenes. You can write your own agentic AI inside of those systems to build your own enhancements and your own capabilities to ease the burden on your threat responders. And then additionally, it's used to enhance cybersecurity in more novel ways. So think about empowering your red team. Think about using it to produce better responses through generative AI and coding. So while the focus has been on nation state, much of this conference has been talking about ransomware and crime more broadly. And so let's take a little look at that. Octotempest is a very notable ransomware operator. It's also referred to as Scattered Spider. Arguably probably the most sophisticated ransomware operator and most prolific operator out there today. If you've been following the press and following your threat updates to the tune of hundreds of new victims in the last several weeks, So they have really ramped up activity recently. They're quite sophisticated. And while I talk about the use of MFA, MFA does not stop these guys necessarily. And they've found ways to move through even fairly well implemented MFA, particularly using device enrollment and defeating the push notification with numeric push notification. So the quite difficult, a number of novel tactics here. Again, let's push through this a little bit. So what do you do about it? Again, I've said MFA quite a bit here. It's because it works, but particularly as it relates to high privilege. If SMS MFA is bad for your personal life, it's really bad for your admin accounts. Self-service password resets for a high privilege account is a really bad idea. The high privilege accounts are literally the keys to the kingdom. And if you haven't induced some level of painful friction as part of the reset, you should probably go back and do that. Those accounts are targeted by everyone across the globe. And with these accounts, that's how they move laterally across the org. It's how they embed more deeply into your org. And so protecting particularly those privileged accounts is key, not just for Octotempest, but for all of it. One of the tactics on the previous slide was they impersonate an IR firm, right? Hey, we just attacked you, now we're here to help you. Hey, why don't you deploy our EDR solution with added features? These added features, of course, enable them to get further embedded into your environment. And so you want to be particularly cognizant of any changes to security product infrastructure in your environment. If the telemetry from your EDR ceases in your SIM one day, that should probably set an alarm off. As a for instance, and if you start to see added executables competing within your solution, either as a new EDR or replacing your old, that should probably be of concern as well. And then what's notable here, and not just unique to Octotempest, have a plan for alternate communications so that when you're attacked, you're not using the infected communications channel as a way to coordinate the response to the infection. That may be an alternate email system. That may be, I know this might be a sensitive topic, something like Signal, but it should not be over the email and telephony of the company or the organization that was just attacked and overtaken by an adversary, because they will do some very interesting things with that. This was fairly recently announced as well. The Tuesday's workshop talked about ransomware as a service and the various components. And so this is part of that ecosystem. LumaStealer was a malware as a service. It did some not so novel things, but certainly stole the critical secrets from the victims, things like bank accounts, things like passwords, things basically that you don't want to have public. That's what they would go after, and then use those and sell them more broadly to the market to gain financial value and ultimately enable more ransomware attacks. But this is a great example of what collective action can yield. And while this is just one set of malware, one operator, it is no longer available today, which is a win for us. And I mentioned this one here, while the mitigations were largely successful for this particular covert network. And so the way way a covert network works is the attacker goes in and compromises network infrastructure, typically household. Why? For multiple reasons. A, it's usually a very easy target. And B, it helps blend in to the surroundings. And so you've seen the movement of attackers from way back in the day emanating from something in country to then moving to something more moderated, like a virtual private server farm, and then into VPN and proxies. And all of those are now becoming more and more treated as suspicious by those of us that defend networks. And so now I can blend directly into the user environment by compromising someone's home router and injecting my traffic and traversing out of there. This particular network was taken down with great success, but it brings up some interesting questions, particularly as we talk about the theme here being strategy and policy. What can we do about this? So in question, it's TP-Link routers and network gear that are particularly problematic. Not to say everything emanating from China is bad, but TP-Link specifically is bad, known to be bad. And so one of the things we've contemplated at Microsoft is publishing a safe from work set of technology, safe for homework set of technologies, kind of like certified home environments, if you're going to be allowed to work remotely. And so, yes, it's difficult for most organizations to direct what can be in someone's home, but you can certainly caveat and say, I can't tell you what can be in your house, but what I can say, if you're going to be allowed to work remotely, you have to do so from this equipment. And doing testing and validation of what you're allowing people to leverage as the infrastructure from where they're working remotely from. And then finally, before I open for questions, Brad talked a little bit about our commitments to Europe. There's been, of course, some change in geopolitics in the last several months. And certainly the elephant in the room is Microsoft, yes, indeed, is a US-based company, and that's cause for concern for various organizations in this room. And what I'm here to tell you is from the most senior leadership in the company on down, we are committed to our European customers, European environment. We are committed to maintaining the security and privacy of EU data. We continue to work EU sovereign efforts and then individual country level sovereign efforts. And that at the highest levels of the company, anything to get in the way of that, we will fight. We have very good lawyers, some of which are in the room, and we will go back after anything we need to do to defend that. So let me pause here. I've got a few minutes left for questions. I moved through that pretty quickly. So let me open it up to the floor. We got one back here.
Thank you. My name is Vitaly Zubok. I'm a researcher from Ukraine. And first of all, I want to thank my company, Microsoft, for its support, digital support for Ukraine. I know there is very much support. However, our topic is NATO's path to digital resilience. And my question is about deterrence strategy. You mentioned it on one of the first slides. What is exact way to deter state-supported adversaries from attack in digital sphere on cyberspace? What do you think?
So deterrence means something to me very specifically. I have a military background. And so when I think deterrence, I think, say, nuclear. I think creating sufficient, holding an anvil over someone's head sufficiently large that it'll crush them if they don't act the way we want to. As a company, as a private sector company, that's beyond our remit, that's beyond law to do today. And so rather than saying deterrence, what I'd say is we should focus on what we can do collectively as a group of private sector companies, as a broader group of pro-democracy entities to act to, short of removing them from the battlefield, from the surface, which is typically kinetically, I don't know that cyber deterrence itself is feasible, but what we can do is we can disrupt, and we can, what a former mentor and boss of mine once said, raise the cost to them of doing business and make those costs significantly higher, if not reasonably infeasible. I don't know that will necessarily deter them, but it will certainly slow them down. There was a question up here, several questions. Here we go. Yes, sir.
Yes, hi, Mihkel, cyber guy from Estonia. So my question is, which I have asked Nicholas as well, is that do you think that your data centers need air protection? And if yes, then who should provide it? Because all of our intelligence is moving into those data centers.
So there's two ways to approach that. Treat each data center as its own critical access that can't be replaced, or to create your environment such that the loss of 1 or 2 or 3 data centers won't matter. And so it's beyond my scope to be able to say, hey, I need a hard data center that can withstand some level of kilogram or pound munition from above. We do take physical security measures quite seriously. Air covers certainly beyond our remit. And so my advice would be to change your thinking instead of how do I protect this singular castle to how do I make sure that I'm diversified across sufficiently number of castles by which the probability of going completely down is effectively 0. And then we had a question here.
Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to know about some changes, any changes of the threat actors after the 2022. So do you have any idea of any changes you find out the threat actors?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Sorry. I'd like to know about any changes, behavior or some kind of TTP of the threat actors.
I see. So since 2022, have we seen a change in tactics?
Excuse me?
Is that, I'm restating the question, have we seen a change in tactics since 2022? So personally, I'd say yes. So this is my observation and not the official position of the company. I would say let's turn that over to the threat analysts. We are seeing an upskilling of tactics in particular. So you've seen threats against Microsoft directly at a very fundamental level, which are very sophisticated. And so again, I go back to supply chain, understand who you're using and be monitoring those very closely. We're seeing an uptick in sophisticated actors being frustrated by the ability to come into an organization directly and then pivoting to the flank and moving to the supply chain and then leveraging that trust relationship between the supply chain and the targeted entity. And so as a, for instance, Commvault was a recent disclosure. Commvault itself contains a lot of data because it's a backup capability, but also in order to back up systems, you've got trust relationships at a technical level. And so it's a brilliant target. And we're seeing more and more fairly brilliant targeting of the supply chain itself.
It can be Russia or China or some other entity. So I mean, the kind of attribution I'd like to know.
I'm sorry?
Sorry. Who is do that? So Russia or China or any other private sector people or criminal? Who's
behind the Commvault? Yeah. So I don't know what I can say, so I'm going to not answer the question.
You know. Thank you.
I'm at 0, the organizers. I'm okay taking one more? Why not? We're going to take one more question.
Thank you, first of all, for the interesting presentation. I'm Katie, I'm from Georgia, I'm a researcher. My question goes to, we spoke about state actors a lot from threat point, but also from the sort of victim side, that they get attacked a lot. I'm wondering what the position is about communication with regards to zero-day vulnerabilities from the vendor side, but also from the states to the vendors. And if you choose the states that you communicate information to, and then the ones that sort of don't get the information maybe remain vulnerable towards the threat that may remain in the system.
So from a state side, we have the GSP, and Nicholas, correct me if I'm wrong, government security program, which allows for early notification. We have a very diligent and deliberate notification process. So we have this thing called Microsoft Security Research Center, which handles all of the vulnerabilities from a bug bounty as well as an internal discovery perspective, in a very deliberate process about who and when we disclose. You might well imagine there's some consideration of are we better off disclosing or delaying slightly so we can fix it rapidly and then disclose it? Beyond me, but I don't know if that answers your question. There's a government program by which you get enhanced communications of both a source code perspective as well as an information sharing perspective. And I am beyond out of time, so thank you all for your time today. Thank you for attending.